I was supposed to be dead. That's what the envelope told me anyway, when it slipped through the mail slot of my Brooklyn apartment at 2 a.m., landing with a soft thud on the hardwood floor. The sound woke me from a half sleep, my laptop still glowing on the coffee table, a half finished article about corporate fraud flickering on the screen. I'd been chasing leads all night, the kind that make your pulse race and your coffee go cold, but nothing prepared me for this. My name is Sarah Kane, and until that moment, I thought I was just a disgraced investigative journalist, blacklisted for digging too deep into my family's empire. Kane Enterprises, a real estate juggernaut with skyscrapers piercing the Manhattan skyline, was my birthright and my curse. I'd spent years exposing their dirty deals, the kind of fraud that buries small businesses and lines the pockets of men in tailored suits. My father, Victor Kane, called it disloyalty. My mother, Claire, called it a phase. My brother Nathan just called me a traitor. But none of them called me dead. Not until now. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, the kind you'd expect from a law firm or a funeral home. My name was typed across the front in crisp black ink. Sarah Elizabeth Kane. No return address, just a small embossed seal from the New York State Department of Health. I stared at it for a long time, my bare feet cold against the floor, the city's distant hum filtering through the window. Something about it felt wrong, like a predator's eyes glinting in the dark. I grabbed a kitchen knife, not for courage, just instinct, and slid it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, heavy, official, with a raised gold seal that caught the light. Certificate of death. My breath caught, sharp and shallow, like I'd been punched. Name of deceased, Sarah Elizabeth Kane. Date of death, August 14th, 2022. Cause of death, drug overdose. Place of death, Bogota, Colombia. My social security number was there, my birth date, even the address of my old loft in Williamsburg before I had gone off grid. I read it again, then a third time, waiting for the words to rearrange into something that made sense. They didn't. I wasn't dead. I was sitting right here, heart pounding, fingers trembling as I gripped the paper. But someone had gone to the trouble of making it official, filed, stamped, and mailed. Someone had erased me, and I didn't need to guess who. My family had always wanted me silent. Now they'd made it legal. I dropped the certificate on the table and paced the room, the walls closing in like a trap. My apartment was a fortress of sorts, bare, functional, with blackout curtains and a deadbolt I checked twice every night. I'd learned to live like a ghost after Bogota, after they'd cut me off, but this was different. This wasn't just disowning me. Bogota. The word clawed its way back, sharp and vivid. 2 years ago, in 2022, my father had insisted I take a sabbatical. "You're burning out, Sarah," he'd said, his voice smooth as whiskey, his eyes cold as steel. "Go clear your head. South America's perfect." I should have known it was a setup. The moment I landed in Colombia, everything unraveled. My bank accounts were frozen, my phone stopped working, the SIM card inexplicably fried. The hotel I'd been booked into claimed no reservation existed, and when I tried to check in, the clerk looked at me like I was a problem he didn't want to solve. I ended up in a crumbling hostel in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered and the air smelled of diesel and desperation. That's when they came for me. I was walking back from an internet cafe trying to reach my editor when 3 men stepped out of the shadows. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Their eyes were enough. Hard, focused, like wolves circling a wounded deer. I ran, my sneakers slipping on the wet cobblestones, my heart slamming against my ribs. The alley was a maze, narrow and twisting, lined with graffiti and overflowing dumpsters. I thought I'd lost them. But then a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back. I fought, kicked, screamed, clawed, but they were stronger. One of them slammed me against a wall, and the world went black. I woke up hours later, sprawled in a ditch, my clothes torn, my bag gone, and a bruise blooming across my jaw. I don't know why they didn't kill me. Maybe they thought they had. I made it back to New York on borrowed money and sheer stubbornness, piecing together what had happened. My family had orchestrated it all, every detail, from the frozen accounts to the cartel thugs who'd hunted me. They wanted me gone, not just out of the company, but out of existence. And now, this death certificate proved it. They'd filed it in 2022, while I was still licking my wounds, claiming I'd overdosed in some Bogota slum. They'd held a quiet memorial, no doubt, with crocodile tears and a closed casket. And they'd moved my inheritance, $12 million 0 cents, my grandfather's legacy, into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, where it could vanish into their empire of lies. I sank onto the couch, the certificate staring up at me like a challenge. My grandfather, Thomas Kane, had been the only one who ever believed in me. He'd built Kane Enterprises from nothing, a scrappy kid from Queens who turned grit into gold. But he'd seen what his children became: Victor, ruthless and calculating; Claire, complicit in her silence. He'd left me everything in his trust, not because I was his favorite, but because he knew I'd fight for what was right. "You're the only one with a spine, Sarah," he'd said, his voice rough with age, his eyes sharp with pride. "Don't let them break you. Now." They were trying to steal that legacy, and they thought I'd stay buried. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only person I trusted enough to call after 2 years of silence. Ethan Reed, my old colleague from the Tribune, picked up on the second ring. His voice was groggy, laced with the kind of exhaustion only a hacker turned freelancer knows. "Sarah, it's 3 in the morning. "I'm dead," I said, my voice cracking. "They filed a death certificate in my name, dated 2022, Bogota, overdose." There was a pause, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. "You're kidding." "I'm holding it right now, my social security number, my birth date, everything." Another pause, then a shift in his tone, sharp and focused. "That's not just fraud, Sarah. That's federal level, lock you away forever serious." "You kept it?" "Of course. Don't touch it, don't smudge it, I'm coming over." I hung up and stared at the certificate again, my mind racing. This wasn't just about money. Kane Enterprises wasn't just a real estate firm. It was a front, a sprawling network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and deals with people who didn't blink at blood. I'd been close to exposing them before Bogota, close enough that my articles had sparked SEC whispers and FBI interest. That's why they'd sent me away, why they'd tried to break me, but they'd miscalculated. I wasn't broken. I was furious. I crossed the room to the small stack of mail I'd ignored for days, my hands shaking as I sifted through it. Junk, bills, a magazine I didn't subscribe to, and then another envelope, this one thinner, with handwriting I recognized instantly. Marcus Holt, my grandfather's attorney, had a heavy slanted script that hadn't changed since I was a kid. I tore it open, my pulse hammering. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once, and a note in his precise hand. "If you're reading this, you're back on your terms. Good. They underestimated you. We have work to do. Marcus." I stared at the words, a lifeline in the dark. Marcus had been my grandfather's confidant, the one who drafted the trust that named me sole heir. He'd known my family would come for me, known they'd play dirty, and he'd waited quietly for me to fight back. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket, a talisman against the chaos. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. "Don't let them break you." I wouldn't, not now, not ever. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 a.m. the city outside restless and alive. I stood by the window, the certificate in one hand, Marcus's note in the other. My family thought they'd written the end of my story, but they were wrong. I wasn't just coming back, I was coming for them. Every lie, every dollar, every secret they'd buried with my name. And when I was done, their empire would burn. The next morning, I stepped out into Brooklyn's gray dawn, the air sharp with the promise of rain. My apartment felt too small, too exposed, like the walls themselves were listening. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying Bogota, the certificate, the note. Ethan had shown up at 4 a.m., his hoodie rumpled, his eyes bloodshot but alert. He'd scanned the certificate with a portable UV light, muttering about watermarks and forgeries, then plugged a flash drive into my laptop to run a trace on the health department's database. "This is real," he'd said, his voice low. "Filed August 2022, notarized, the works. Someone with pull made this happen." "Victor," I'd said, my father's name like ash in my mouth. "Or someone he paid." Ethan had leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Sarah, this is bigger than you think. Kane Enterprises isn't just shady. They're connected. Politicians, offshore banks, maybe even cartels. You poke this, you're poking a hornet's nest." "I've been poking it my whole life," I'd said. "They just made it personal." Now, as I walked toward the subway, my backpack heavy with the certificate and Marcus's note, I felt the weight of his warning. The streets were alive with the usual chaos: taxis honking, vendors shouting, a dog barking at a skateboarder. But I scanned every face, every shadow. Bogota had taught me paranoia, the kind that keeps you alive. I pulled my hood up, my boots splashing through puddles, and headed for Manhattan. Marcus Holt's office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown, the kind of place where power feels tangible, like static in the air. The elevator ride was silent, the mirrored walls reflecting my pale face, my dark circles, the bruise on my jaw that hadn't faded completely from Bogota. I looked like someone who'd been to hell and back, which wasn't far from the truth. The receptionist, a woman with perfect nails and zero warmth, barely looked up when I gave my name. "Mr. Holt's expecting you," she said, her voice clipped. I followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art, the kind that costs more than most people's houses. Marcus's door was heavy oak, his name etched in gold. I knocked once, and it opened. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his glasses thicker, but his eyes were the same, sharp, unyielding, like he could see through bullshit and time itself. "Sarah," he said, his voice cracking just slightly. "In the flesh." "Surprise," I said, stepping inside. The office smelled of leather and coffee, with a faint trace of cigar smoke. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with legal tomes and files that probably held secrets as dark as my family's. I sat without waiting to be asked, the chair firm and unyielding, like the man himself. "They filed a death certificate," I said, pulling it from my bag and sliding it across the desk. "Filed, stamped, mailed. I'm guessing you knew." He didn't touch it, just glanced at the seal, then back at me. "I knew they'd try something. Not this." He leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Your father filed for probate in late 2022. Claimed you overdosed in Bogota, no body recovered. A tragedy too painful to discuss." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Classic Victor Kane. "Did he cry at the memorial?" "Probably." Marcus's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "He's good at theater." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "What else?" "The trust. The money. Where is it?" He opened a drawer and pulled out a leather folder thick with documents. "Your grandfather's trust. You're the sole heir to $12 million, 0 cents. plus the Kane estate in upstate New York. But there's a catch. There always is. You have to be alive, legally, and you have to stay out of Kane Enterprises. No board seats, no shares, no involvement. Thomas knew Victor would try to control you. This was his way of protecting you. And if I'm not alive? I asked, already knowing the answer. It defaults to the family trust. Victor and Nathan control it. You turn 33 in 3 months. If this isn't reversed by then, it's theirs. I nodded, the math sinking in. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted the money. And the power, Marcus added. Kane Enterprises isn't what it seems. Your articles were getting too close, Sarah. You were naming names, tracing accounts. They couldn't afford you alive and talking. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing Marcus's note. It felt like a promise, a tether to the fight ahead. What do we do? He leaned forward, his voice low. We prove you're alive. We file a motion to revoke the certificate, and we dig quietly, carefully. They'll come for you again, Sarah. Harder this time. Let them, I said, my voice steady. I'm done running. The subway ride back to Brooklyn was a blur, the clatter of the train drowning out my thoughts. I kept my hood up, my eyes on the floor, but I felt it. The prickle of being watched. A man in a gray jacket lingered too long by the doors, his phone angled just enough to make me wonder. I switched cars at the next stop, my heart pounding, and lost him in the crowd. Bogota had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now they were screaming. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, checked the windows, and pulled the curtains tight. The certificate sat on the table next to my laptop and a cold cup of coffee. I opened my email, half expecting another threat, but found something else. A message from an unknown sender. No name, just a string of numbers. Meet Lena Voss. She knows. 7 p.m., Red Hook Warehouse, Pier 9. No signature, no context, just an address and a name. Lena Voss. I'd heard it before, whispered in the newsroom when I was still at the Tribune. A whistleblower, ex-accountant for Kane Enterprises, who'd vanished after leaking documents to the SEC. If she was reaching out now, she had something big and dangerous. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the delete button. Every instinct told me this was a trap, but every nerve told me I had to go. If Lena had evidence, it could be the key to dismantling my family's empire. I called Ethan, my voice low. You know Lena Voss? A pause, then a whistle. Jesus, Sarah, she's a ghost. Dropped off the grid after Kane Enterprises sued her into oblivion. If she's contacting you, it's either a gold mine or a setup. I'm meeting her tonight, Red Hook. Alone? Are you insane? Probably, I said. You in? He sighed, the kind of sigh that said he was already grabbing his keys. Send me the address. And Sarah, bring a knife. Red Hook at dusk was a different beast. All shadows and rust. The kind of place where secrets go to die. The warehouse on Pier 9 loomed like a relic, its windows boarded, its walls tagged with fading graffiti. The air smelled of salt water and oil, the Hudson lapping against the docks. I parked my beat-up Honda a block away, my knife tucked into my boot, my phone on silent. Ethan was already there, leaning against a lamppost, his hoodie blending into the dark. Creepy as hell, he muttered, scanning the street. You sure about this? No, I said, but I started walking anyway. The warehouse door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling onto the cracked pavement. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning like a warning. Inside, the air was thick, stale, with rows of crates and rusted machinery casting long shadows. A figure stood at the far end, backlit by a single bulb. Female, tall, with short hair and a posture that said she'd seen trouble and survived it. "There, Kane." Her voice was low. I stepped forward, Ethan at my side. "Lena Voss." She nodded, her eyes flicking to Ethan, then back to me. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I'd be legally dead," I said. "What do you have?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive, small and black, like it held the weight of the world. 5 years of Kane Enterprises books, shell companies, wire transfers, payoffs. Your family's been laundering money through fake development projects. Cayman Islands, Panama, you name it. They needed you gone because you were too close to the truth. I stared at the drive, my mouth dry. Why now? Why me? "Because I'm tired of running," she said, "and you're the only one crazy enough to take them down." Before I could respond, a noise cut through the silence. A sharp crack, like glass breaking. Ethan spun, his hand on the gun I didn't know he carried. "We're not alone," he whispered. Lena's eyes widened. "They found me?" I grabbed the drive, my heart racing. "Go, now!" We bolted for the door, but the shadows moved faster. Footsteps echoed, heavy and deliberate, closing in from all sides. I didn't look back. I ran. The drive burning a hole in my pocket, the warehouse a labyrinth of danger. Bogota had taught me how to survive. Now New York was testing me. The warehouse door slammed shut behind us, the sound swallowed by the roar of my pulse. Red Hook's pier stretched out like a graveyard of rust and secrets, the Hudson's black water glinting under a moonless sky. I clutched Lena Voss's flash drive in my fist, its edges biting into my palm as we sprinted across the cracked pavement. Ethan was a step ahead, his gun drawn, his eyes scanning the shadows. Lena trailed, her breath ragged, her face pale but resolute. The footsteps behind us were relentless, heavy, deliberate, closing in like a noose. "Whaff," Ethan hissed, veering toward a narrow alley between two crumbling buildings. I followed, my boots slipping on wet gravel, my heart a hammer against my ribs. The alley was a tunnel of darkness, lined with overflowing dumpsters and the faint stench of decay. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. Bogota had taught me that hesitation is a death sentence. We burst onto a side street, the warehouse now a hulking silhouette against the skyline. Ethan grabbed my arm, pulling me behind a rusted shipping container. Lena crouched beside us, her hands trembling as she zipped her jacket. "They're Kane's," she whispered. "Private security, maybe worse." "How many?" I asked, my voice low, my knife now in my hand. "3, maybe 4, Ethan said, peering around the container's edge. "They're not here to talk." I nodded, my mind racing. The flash drive was a ticking bomb. 5 years of Kane Enterprises dirty laundry, shell companies, wire transfers, and payoffs funneled through a front called Archangel Syndicate. Lena had risked everything to get it to me, and now my family was risking everything to stop us. They'd declared me dead to steal $12 million, 0 cents, my grandfather's legacy. But this was bigger. This was about their empire, a $500 million, 0 cent network of fraud, laundering, and blood money. And I was the only one stupid enough to light the match. A beam of light swept the street, a flashlight cutting through the dark. Ethan pressed a finger to his lips, his gun steady. The footsteps slowed, then stopped, replaced by a low murmur. 2 voices, maybe 3. I caught fragments. "Can't let her leave." "Orders?" "Clean." My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a chase, this was an execution. "We move now," Ethan whispered. "Cars 2 blocks east, stay low." We slipped out, hugging the shadows, the city's distant hum our only cover. The street was empty, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. We made it 1 block before the first shot rang out. A sharp crack that shattered the silence. The bullet grazed the brick wall beside me, spraying dust into my face. I ducked, my knees hitting the pavement, my breath a jagged gasp. Run! Ethan shouted, firing back into the dark. Lena grabbed my arm, hauling me up, and we bolted. The second shot came closer, pinging off a street sign. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I kept moving, the flash drive a lifeline in my pocket. We rounded a corner, the Honda's headlights a beacon in the distance. Ethan reached it first, yanking the driver's door open. Get in, he yelled, already turning the key. Lena dove into the back seat, and I scrambled into the passenger side, slamming the door as a third shot cracked the rear windshield. The glass spider-webbed, but held. Ethan floored the gas, the tires screeching as we peeled away, the warehouse fading into the night. I gripped the dashboard, my chest heaving. They're not stopping, I said, glancing at the side mirror. Headlights followed, gaining fast, a black SUV, its grille like a predator's maw. Be my won't, Lena said, her voice grim. Not until they have the drive or us. Ethan swerved through traffic, weaving between taxis and delivery trucks, the city a blur of neon and noise. The SUV stayed close, its driver reckless, clipping a parked car without slowing. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slick with sweat, and dialed Marcus Holt. It went to voicemail. Marcus, it's Sarah. We're being chased. Red Hook. They're shooting. Call me back. Student? Ethan snapped, taking a sharp left. Who the hell are these guys? Pains cleaners, Lena said. They handle problems. People like me. Like you. The SUV rammed us, the impact jerking me forward, my seatbelt biting into my shoulder. Ethan cursed, fighting the wheel as the Honda fishtailed. Hold on, he shouted, flooring it again. We shot through a red light, horns blaring, and for a moment I thought we'd lost them. Then the SUV roared back, its headlights blinding in the rear view. We can't outrun them, I said, my voice steady despite the panic clawing my chest. We need a plan. Working on it, Ethan muttered, scanning the road. There's a construction site half a mile up, narrow access, we can lose them there. Do it, Lena said, checking her bag. I've got backups of the drive. If we go down, the data doesn't... I nodded, but the words "if we go down" lodged in my throat. I'd survived Bogota, survived the ditch where they'd left me for dead, but this felt different. This wasn't just survival. This was war. The construction site loomed ahead, a skeleton of steel beams and concrete fenced off with chain link and warning signs. Ethan cut the wheel, the Honda skidding through a gap in the fence, gravel crunching under the tires. The SUV followed, but the narrow path slowed it, its bulk scraping against a bulldozer. Ethan wove through the site, dodging cranes and piles of rebar, until we reached a dead end, a concrete wall, no way out. End of the line, Ethan said, killing the engine. We fight or we hide. Hide, Lena said, already opening her door. There's a storm drain under the foundation. I saw it on the plans. We scrambled out, the SUV's headlights sweeping closer. Lena led us to a rusted grate, half hidden by debris. Ethan pried it open, the metal groaning, and we dropped into the dark, the air damp and sour. The grate clanged shut above us, just as the SUV's tires crunched to a stop. Voices echoed, sharp and angry, but the words were muffled. I held my breath, my knife in one hand, the flash drive in the other, and waited. Minutes passed, endless and suffocating. Then, silence. Ethan exhaled, his face barely visible in the dim light. They're gone. For now. Lena nodded, her expression unreadable. They'll keep coming. That drive is their death sentence. And ours, I said, slipping it into my pocket. Let's move. We emerged in a drainage tunnel a quarter mile away, the city's underbelly a maze of pipes and shadows. My clothes were soaked, my hands scraped raw, but the drive was safe, and so were we, for the moment. Ethan hotwired a parked van, and we drove to a safe house in Jersey City, a nondescript row house I'd rented under an alias after Bogota. The walls were bare, the furniture secondhand, but it had a deadbolt and a view of the street. I locked the door, checked the windows, and sank onto a sagging couch, the adrenaline finally fading. Lena plugged the drive into a burner laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "It's all here," she said, her voice low. "Archangel Syndicate. A front for laundering. Hundreds of millions wired through fake development projects. Your father's signature is on every major transfer." I leaned over her shoulder, the screen a grid of numbers and names. Kane Enterprises had been careful, but not careful enough. The transfers led to offshore accounts in the Caymans, Panama, and the British Virgin Islands, masked as consultant fees and property deals. But the real kicker was the loan. $5 million, 0 cents, signed in my name, tied to a forged passport scan. If I hadn't found this, I'd be on the hook for it, framed as a willing accomplice or a reckless addict. "They needed me dead," I said, my voice flat. "Alive, I'm a liability. Dead, I'm a scapegoat." Ethan paced, his gun still in his hand. "This is federal level shit, Sarah. RICO, money laundering, maybe even terrorism financing. You take this public, you're painting a target on your back." "I already have one," I said, thinking of the SUV, the shots, the men in the warehouse. "We need to move fast. Marcus can file a motion to revoke the death certificate, but we need more hard evidence, witnesses, something they can't bury." Lena looked up, her eyes sharp. "There's someone else. Olivia, my sister." The name hit like a punch. Olivia Kane, the golden child, always polished, always loyal. She'd stood by our parents through every scandal, every lie, but she'd also been in Bogota, part of the sabbatical plan, her smile too perfect, her concern too rehearsed. I hadn't trusted her then, and I didn't now. "She knows," Lena said. "She's been in the meetings, seen the books. If you can turn her, you've got a witness." I shook my head. "Olivia's their puppet. She'd rather die than betray them." "People change," Lena said. "When the walls close in, loyalty cracks." I didn't respond, but the idea lingered, a seed of doubt. Olivia had always been the one to smooth things over, to keep the family's image pristine. But what if she was trapped too? What if she knew too much? The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. "Storage unit. Brooklyn, 1456 Fulton. Look for box 19. Hurry." No signature, just a burner phone's cold anonymity. I showed it to Ethan, who frowned. "Another trap." "Maybe," I said, "but we can't ignore it." We drove to Fulton Street, the safe house's stale air replaced by Brooklyn's grit, coffee shops, graffiti, the hum of early commuters. The storage facility was a squat concrete building, its sign faded, its security cameras suspiciously dark. Ethan picked the lock on the side gate, and we slipped inside, the hallway dim and musty. Box 19 was at the far end, a metal door with a padlock that looked too new. Ethan cut it with bolt cutters, and we opened the door. Inside was a single crate, packed with files, contracts, ledgers, passport scans, all with my name, all forged. The $5 million 0 cents loan was there, stapled to a fake ID, with my face but a different birth date. There were emails, too, between my father and a man named Bernard Cross, Kane Enterprises lawyer, discussing Phase 2 containment. I felt sick. The truth a weight I couldn't shake. Then the lights flickered. and a shadow moved at the end of the hall. Ethan drew his gun, but it was too late. Two men in black masks rushed us, one swinging a crowbar, the other a taser. I dove behind the crate, the crowbar missing my head by inches. Ethan fired, the shot deafening, and one man dropped, clutching his leg. The other lunged, the taser crackling. I kicked his knee hard, and he stumbled, giving Ethan time to tackle him. We zip-tied them to a pipe, their faces hidden, their silence chilling. "We need to go," Ethan said, grabbing the crate. "They'll send more." We fled, the files stuffed into my backpack, the van's engine roaring as we sped away. But the danger wasn't over. Back at the safe house, my laptop pinged. A remote hack, wiping my files before I could stop it. A message flashed on the screen. "You can't outrun us." I slammed the lid shut, my hands shaking. They were everywhere, watching, waiting. The Manhattan courthouse was a circus when I arrived. The marble steps slick with rain, the press a swarm of cameras and shouted questions. "Sarah Kane, the dead heiress, are you really alive?" I ignored them, my black coat clinging to me, my hair pulled back, my eyes fixed on the doors. Marcus walked beside me, his umbrella useless in the wind. Ethan followed, scanning the crowd, his gun hidden but ready. Inside, my family waited. Victor, my father, stood by the courtroom doors, his suit impeccable, his face a mask of control. Claire, my mother, was beside him, her pearls gleaming, her expression blank. Nathan, my brother, paced, his hands flexing, his glare venomous. Olivia stood apart, her face pale, her eyes darting. I met her gaze, and for a moment I saw something. Fear, maybe guilt. Then she looked away. The courtroom was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing. I filed the motion to revoke my death certificate, my voice clear despite the knot in my chest. Marcus handed over the documents. My ID, medical records, the forged certificate. The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, flipped through them. "Unusual," she said, "but not unprecedented." Nathan interrupted, his voice loud. "She faked her death for attention, Your Honor. She's unstable, always has been." I turned to him, my anger flaring. "You forged my death to steal $12 million, 0 cents. Don't talk to me about unstable." The judge silenced us, her gavel a sharp crack. "This court will verify Miss Kane's identity." Ruling postponed. 30 days. As we left, a red laser dot danced across my chest. A sniper's mark. The courtroom erupted, marshals shouting, Ethan pulling me down. The lockdown lasted an hour, the threat gone, but the message clear. We're watching. I walked out shaken but unbroken, the press mobbing me again. "How does it feel to be resurrected?" I didn't answer. I wasn't back to feel. I was back to fight. Days later, a new blow landed. An envelope arrived at the safe house, hand-delivered, embossed with the Connecticut Probate Court's seal. Petition for emergency conservatorship. Sarah Elizabeth Kane. Grounds: delusional behavior, inability to manage affairs. They were calling me insane. Using my Bogota clinic stay. 3 days for dehydration and panic as proof. Forged psych reports, signed by a Dr. Alan Kerr I'd never met. Claimed I was paranoid, volatile, a danger to myself. I folded the summons, my hands steady, but my mind racing. They weren't just after my money. They wanted my freedom. Olivia showed up that night, unannounced, her hair disheveled, her eyes red. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, slipping me a manila envelope. "They're planning to lock you away. Dad's got Kerr on payroll. I heard him." I stared at her, the sister I'd never trusted. "Why tell me now?" "Because I'm scared," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't sign up for this." The envelope held a draft affidavit, my signature forged, claiming I'd confessed to mental instability. I felt the ground shift, the betrayal cutting deeper than I'd expected. But Olivia's fear was real, and for the first time, I wondered if Lena was right, if my sister could be turned. The pressure mounted. A smear campaign hit the airwaves. Doctored videos showing me stumbling, slurring, looking like the addict they'd painted me as. My phone buzzed with threats. My email flooded with hate. Ethan, my rock, betrayed me, leaking the safe house's location to Victor for reasons I couldn't fathom. I fled to Jersey City, alone, my trust shattered. But the burner phone pinged again. They know you have the files. Be careful. The sender was a ghost, but their warnings were my lifeline. Lena testified in a closed hearing, her voice steady as she laid out the Archangel Syndicate's web shell companies, emails, Victor's orders. Olivia took the stand, her hands shaking, and confessed her role, begging my forgiveness. Bernard Cross, the family lawyer, folded under pressure, implicating Victor in a deal that could send him to prison. I testified last, my voice raw but unbroken. I didn't die, I said. I survived, and I won't let them steal my truth. The judge reinstated my identity, froze the estate, and escalated the case to the FBI, SEC, and IRS. Victor and Bernard faced RICO charges, their empire crumbling. I stood in the courtroom, the weight lifting, the truth of fire that burned clean. 6 months later, I opened the Kane Truth Initiative, a nonprofit for victims of financial fraud, its walls lined with stories of survival. A package arrived that day, no return address, wrapped in soft paper. Inside was my grandfather's sketch of a building, the one he'd dreamed of, a haven for the broken. A note in my mother's hand read, "You were always his dream." I didn't cry. I smiled, the wound healing in its own way. That night, I sketched a new blueprint, a resource center for justice labeled Hope, Anchor, Rise. The fight wasn't over. The Kane legacy, a cryptic file on Lena's drive, held secrets I'd yet to crack. But I was ready. I'd walked through fire and I'd do it again. Because when you speak your truth, you light the way for others. And that's how we rebuild. Not by erasing the past, but by choosing who we become.